In Dwarf Fortress, cursed items aren't really a thing. Sure, reading a book containing the secrets of life and death can turn you into a necromancer, and playing Yahtzee with shine dice can turn you into a vampire or werewolf, but becoming a powerful, immortal, supernatural being seems like more of a boon than a curse, as long as you're able to be chill about it. But in my world, there is one item that I have called cursed a couple times before, due to its ability to inspire obsession in any creature that encounters it. The artifact Nazoosh Treason Romanced that was created by the dwarf Onal Raznal in the first year of my first fortress. Over the 182 years since its construction, I have fought off numerous thieves and protected Treason Romanced in a truly terrible vault, ambushed a successful raider when she turned up to one of my other fortresses with the Nazoosh in tow, and even turned against a fellow dwarven civilization by raiding them to take my old musical artifact for my musical fortress. But now that adventure mode is out, and I can interact with my world and Treason Romanced in a new way, I've taken some inspiration from The Lord of the Rings and hatched a plan to steal Treason Romanced and throw it into an evil volcano so that its ability to sow chaos and inspire obsession will no longer have an impact on me or my world. My first attempt to pull this off was as the adventurer Might of Brightness Dashed. As her, I embarked from a human hamlet in the south of my world and began making my way towards my old musical fortress. Along the way, I encountered some animals in the wild and had mixed success in dealing with them. The ostriches I found, I guiltily used as training. The alligators I was ambushed by, I almost literally ran circles around as I escaped. And the wolves I stumbled across tore me apart limb from limb. My experience as Maita made me realize that doubling the length of my trek by embarking so far away from Treason Romanced was basically just doubling my risk of dying for no real reason, and so with my second adventurer, Zuglar Color Tools, I set out for my dwarven hillocks in the north of my world and began an abridged trek towards my musical fortress. The shorter distance didn't mean I was completely safe though, and I soon found myself ambushed by another pack of wolves. But when they got distracted by a turkey, and I managed to scramble my way to safety, I was able to avoid ambushes for the rest of my short trip. After a brief detour where I found myself knocking on the front door of my old hermit fortress, I eventually arrived at my destination and began my hunt for the Nazoosh. I started in the old tavern, but came up empty after looking in both chests. While I thought that was probably where I would have left it, I didn't immediately panic because fortresses can get a little chaotic whenever they're left to their own devices, and so I just widened my search and began combing through the fortress. But eventually, after 30 minutes and 8 floors of artifact hunting, I was still one Nazoosh short of a curse and had to admit defeat. With no way to know where Treason Romanced was or how I could track it down, I decided to take a little break from adventure mode to look around Legends mode and see what was going on. Surprisingly, Legends mode maintained that the Nazoosh was still in my musical fortress, only it wasn't stored in the main tavern where I had initially kept it, but in the musical torture tavern I had created in a later video. Unfortunately for me, on my adventure I had approached the door to this secondary tavern and had found it locked, meaning it was impossible for me to retrieve my Nazoosh in adventure mode. For a little while, it seemed to me that this was where my journey would have to end, but then I had the realization that launching a raid in fortress mode would bypass adventure mode restrictions like locked doors and raised bridges, and so I soon found myself setting up a new colony directly next to my musical fortress. I didn't want to launch a raid without a full and fully equipped squad, and so I spent a year building up my fortress, creating armor, and welcoming new migrants directly into my treason retrieval squad. Once my dwarves were ready to raid, I sent them next door with instructions to steal anything valuable they might come across. The first attempt wound up being quite a big failure, with only 6 dwarves returning, each of them empty-handed. But I've never let the deaths of a couple dwarves knock me off course before, and I wasn't about to start now. So I sent what was left of treason retrieval out a couple more times, and they rewarded me by bringing back a pile of artifacts, including Treason Romanced. With my Nazoosh now freed, I retired the fortress and returned to adventure mode for a third time. This time I was Toulon the Dwarf, embarking from the same dwarven hillocks as Zuglar had a year prior. Upon my arrival at my Nazoosh-stealing fortress, I found that Treason Romanced wasn't in the spot I had left it, which was a little concerning but not overly surprising given the 2 weeks it had spent laying loose on the ground. While I did check the inventories of all the dwarves I passed in case I needed to commit some light robbery to get it back, I mostly looked for the Nazoosh by zooming out my camera and wandering around the area. While doing this, I managed to pick up a couple different artifacts that had also been taken by my raids and scrambled by my dwarves, before eventually finding the Nazoosh nestled in a peaceful little glade. Seeing it in my inventory briefly made me feel like I should run away to some abandoned fortress where I could devolve into a weird Nazoosh-playing creature in peace, but once that thought passed, I stole some booze and plump helmets from the food stockpile in my musical fortress, settled in for a restful night of sleep, and prepared myself for the long journey I was about to embark on. When the sun rose the next morning, I left my old fortresses behind and began traveling west, only to immediately get interrupted by a pack of wolves. The fight went well for me, and it's always a good feeling when you go from prey to predator, but getting attacked half a day into a 4-day hike put me on pace for 7 more wolf attacks before I reached my destination, which didn't make me optimistic about my chances. And that feeling was reinforced further when, the next day, I was ambushed by wolves yet again. This time there was fewer of them, and Toulon was immediately enraged, so it was hardly a fair fight, but the threat of losing Treason Romance to a random patch of grass in a random section of woods I would never find again still brought stakes to the whole ordeal. And then, when I was only a day or 2 away from the volcano, I was attacked a 3rd and final time. This time there were 5 wolves, and as we fought, their blood competed with the snow for visual dominance, as their teeth competed with my armor for physical dominance. In the end, it seemed that my martial trance was enough to push me over the edge and make me victorious, leaving me in possession of Treason Romanced with nothing but haunted savanna separating me from total victory. Crossing that savanna turned out to be a non-issue, and I soon found myself exiting the fast travel screen and ascending the side of the volcano. As I arrived at the rim, I stepped around the old embarking trash I had left here along with a mostly destroyed fortress all those years ago, and got into position at a perfect point on the rim balanced between the magma to my right and a whole lot of nothing to my left. I had picked up a lot of artifacts in my hunt for the Nazoosh, so I practiced my artifact throwing technique by working my way down the list until I arrived at Treason Romanced. Logically, I'm aware that it doesn't actually have any cursed properties, and that destroying it is only good for my world because I will have nothing to raid fortresses for anymore. And yet, throwing it into the magma and watching it sink into the ooze felt like a nice, fitting end for an artifact that's existed in my world since the very beginning. With nothing more to do, and no giant eagles coming to save me, I began making my way down the mountain as I embarked on a new trek to retire somewhere nice and dwarfy. The yak skeleton I encountered as I descended didn't seem to get the memo on how heroic I had been though, and so I soon found myself gored and as good as dead. While dying to a yak skeleton wasn't exactly how I had drawn up my retirement, nothing could take away my heroic act, and I couldn't ask for anything more than that. Thanks for watching, an extra thank you to those of you who support me on Patreon, and I'll see you next time.